Masahiro Sakurai took a huge risk with Super Smash Bros. On Nintendo 64, but that gamble paid off. So for the sequel, the developer would have all the resources he would need, a substantial budget, a larger development team, and perhaps most importantly, full support from the higher-ups at Nintendo. Well, all the resources that is except for one: time. The new game would need to be ready in a mere 13 months. Undeterred, Sakurai threw himself into the project, not taking a single day off for over a year. He would later describe it as a grueling development cycle. I was living a really destructive lifestyle. I'd work for over 40 hours in a row, then go back home to sleep for 4. But this kind of dedication made sense because, make no mistake, this was the most critically important game he had ever worked on. While 64 was experimental, this new game would have to be nothing less than fantastic, because while Smash 64 was a small passion project, the follow-up was positioned as the killer app for Nintendo's new console, the GameCube. What nobody at the time could have predicted was that this game would turn out to be far more important than even they anticipated. In fact, this game would be legendary. This is Super Smash Bros. Melee was released in the US just a few weeks after the GameCube's launch, December 3rd, 2001. I remember reading impressions from people online who'd bought the system the day it came out, but couldn't comment on anything besides the menus, because they were waiting for Melee. And I would have to wait a while too. You see, the GameCube was new, it was expensive, and frankly, I spent the majority of 2001 just mourning the death of the Dreamcast. But I was finally ready to move on by my birthday, in May of '02. And that's when I got a GameCube. Once I'd watched that glorious intro movie and gotten my jaw off the floor, I headed straight into training to get a feel for this strange-looking but incredibly comfortable controller. I figured the best way to do that would be with my main character from Smash 64, Pikachu. Alright, the game I've heard so much about, the game I've been looking forward to for all this time. Here we go! Wait, what's going on? I can't hit him. Why can't I hit him? I tried screwing around with the settings, and then it dawned on me. Link has a shield. On the N64, it was just for show, but Melee was different, and this was just a small glimpse of how different. What makes for a great game? The gameplay. And Melee took the basics of Smash 64's design and did what all great sequels do. Expanded everything. The core game was still here. Smash attacks, tilts, aerial specials, rolling and shielding. But while the surface elements were similar, the depth of the mechanics became far greater. For starters, there are way more defensive options. With perfect timing, you can power shield an attack and instantly retaliate. You can spot dodge in place, which takes more finesse than a roll. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, you can air dodge in multiple directions. Offensive options were also expanded. You can execute throws in 4 directions instead of just 2. Each character now also has a 4th special move, a side B, and the signature smash attacks can be charged to become more powerful, meaning that with timing those finishers can become even more potent. Moreover, the characters, the engine, the animations, and a ton of the moves are all dramatically overhauled to create a far more dynamic and much faster paced experience. Movement, dodging, attacking, defending, everything just feels so sharp and crunchy and kinetic. Of course, gameplay wasn't the only improvement. Melee had something else that Smash 64 lacked: an actual budget. The graphics alone were a testament to that. It was the perfect title for Nintendo's new console, because it allowed for a direct comparison to show just how far graphics had come in a single generation. Where Smash 64's characters were a bit off at best and Donkey Kong at worst, Melee showcased these icons looking better than we'd ever seen them. I remember just staring at this image of Mario for minutes at a time back in 2001, marveling at how, well, detailed everything was. Melee established a precedent that still holds true today. While Mario would remain more cartoony in the next year's Super Mario Sunshine, Smash Bros. From here on would be just a touch more real. Melee didn't just look good, it brought a fidelity that wouldn't have been possible before. And where Smash 64's stages felt like plastic playsets, Melee's felt far more genuine. I mean, in 64 you could select from 9 stages, but Melee had 29. The variety was expanded just as much as the selection itself, even if the background details were kind of lacking. Seriously, this blurry grass texture is all over the place. But I suspect the backgrounds were done this way to keep a high frame rate, and it's really no big deal either way. And oddly enough, Final Destination and Battlefield, 2 stages that lack the frantic hazards and chaos of the others, are now selectable. We'll have to get to that in a minute. Single-player mode was a bit of a bust in 64, but Melee has a lot more going for it. The signature feature in single-player is the new adventure mode. Choose a character, then take them through an array of challenges based on Nintendo's represented franchises. Getting to Falcon Kick a row of Goombas or egg-rolling through Mute City was a blast. A huge aspect of Smash Bros. Appeal is that it's a celebration of all things Nintendo, and seeing these divergent franchises pay tribute is a fantastic concept. The problem is that some franchises got paid a little bit more tribute than others. You'd run through an entire Mario level, hunt for the Triforce on a unique dungeon map, escape through the Brinstar escape shaft, and then you'd fight 2 little Donkey Kongs, and then a big Donkey Kong. Or just beat up a bunch of Pikachu. I mean, like I said, it was a great concept. It just left something to be desired. Classic mode returned, and a bigger roster meant less repetition. Event matches served up specific varied challenges with all kinds of unique situations. All-Star was a new mode inspired by Kirby Superstar's Arena, where you'd have to take down every character with limited healing. Oh god, and I haven't even talked about the characters yet! Smash 64 had a total of 12 to choose from, but Melee more than doubled its predecessor, bringing the selection to 26. That includes everyone from Smash 64 and a ton of newcomers. I mean, look at all these! Mewtwo, Peach and Zelda and Sheik and Bowser, Pichu for some reason, Falco, who plays a lot like Fox, Dr. Mario? Eh? One thing that's often criticized about Melee's roster is the prevalence of clone characters. You see, in Smash 64, Luigi's moveset was very obviously modified from Mario's, but in Melee, 7 of the 26 characters are done in a similar way. And in contrast to those critics, I feel the same way about them here that I did about Luigi in 64. It never really bothered me. For one, as Sakurai said years later, clone characters don't actually take roster slots away from anybody. They're done because development doesn't have enough time to build an entirely new character, so these guys are here as a bonus, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I mean, it'd be one thing if these were just costume changes or palette swaps, but across the board, these so-called clones have enough unique attributes that they don't feel redundant. I mean, Ganondorf is very obviously not Captain Falcon. Young Link is a little bit faster and a little bit less powerful. Pichu is adorable and suicidal. And, wait, who the crap are these guys? Well, I talked about it last time. Super Smash Bros. Has become a kingmaker. And Melee? Melee is where that influence became apparent. In fact, I would go so far as to say that Melee is the king of kingmakers. For it was here that Super Smash Bros. Single-handedly brought an entire franchise from rags to riches. Melee took an obscure series that nobody had ever heard of and turned it into one of the most well-known video games in history. I speak, of course, of the Ice Climbers! Nobody had seen the Ice Climbers in nearly 17 years since their eponymous debut on the NES. Their game was kind of the Bubsy 3D of 1985. I mean, in a bygone age, it would have been okay. But to come out so close to Super Mario Bros., it's no wonder the game was forgotten amid a slew of early NES titles. You don't see anybody pining for that guy with the butt from Slalom, you know what I mean? But in any case, to go from retro obscurity to rubbing elbows with Nintendo's All-Stars is an incredible step up. Whether Ice Climbers the game deserves it or not, do you really think it'd keep getting re-released if it weren't for Smash Bros? Game & Watch wasn't nearly as forgotten, but he is similar in that Smash is basically keeping the character alive at this point. The thing is, before Smash, he didn't even really have a character. Sakurai and his team took a graphic made from the limitations of LCD technology from 1980 and gave this thing a discernible personality and fighting style. But okay, I know what Melee really brought to the table, and it was most certainly the signature symbol of the series' status as a kingmaker. Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem debuted on the Famicom in 1990, but prior to 2001, neither I nor anyone else I knew had ever heard of it. Nintendo's strategic tactical role-playing franchise had never seen a single release outside of Japan. Because of this, throughout most of Melee's development, Marth and Roy were meant to be removed from the game when it was released internationally, but at the last second, the decision was made to keep them in, and appearing alongside some of the biggest icons in gaming history raised their star. But what helped them stand out even more was just how fun they were to play. Marth and Roy are fairly realistic characters with more technical fighting styles, and they stand out amid the menagerie of cartoony Nintendo mascots. It didn't matter that I never played a single game he was in. Marth was so quick and so awesome and so fun to play, he quickly became my character of choice. Following their appearance in Melee, Fire Emblem became entrenched outside of Japan, and nearly every game since has been released on a wider scale. God, Melee was just such an incredible game, and the list of reasons just goes on and on. Hundreds of trophies, Coin battles, stamina battles, greater customability, new items, keeping track of your stats over time, milestones, home run contests, quick loading times, music rearrangements, that Virtual Boy that showed up if you set the language to Japanese, tilting the menus with the C-stick! The list of improvements and changes and just polish is legendary, to the point that I'm not even remotely going to be able to detail all of it. Melee revolutionized what was already a revolutionary game. I can't think of another sequel that so greatly expanded and embellished and improved on its predecessor to such a ridiculous degree. I mean, Smash 64 was a fun game, but it might as well have been a tech demo next to Melee. And that made somebody mad, didn't it? I got a few less than thrilled responses with my criticisms of Smash 64 last time, and I feel like I need to address a few things. Smash Brothers, it seems, kinda has a fractured community. There are people who are extremely dedicated to a single game in the series, to the exclusion of all the others. And you know what? That is fine. The Smash Brothers series has a lot of variants, and so which one you enjoy the most has a lot to do with what specifically you like about the experience. So when I said that Smash 64 lacks precision and balance, I was speaking only from my own experience and perspective. But I should probably elucidate that perspective. Now, I wouldn't call myself a casual player at all. I've put hundreds of hours into every game in the series. I prefer one-on-one stock matches way more than anything else. I usually keep most of the items on, but their frequency set to low. I mean, I think they can spice up a match, but the game should not be centered around them. I don't mind turning them off either, especially when I'm playing a serious match. I usually like large stages that allow for long, epic games. In 64, I mained with Pikachu, but I switched to Marth in Melee, and my character of choice has been Speedy and Blue ever since. But perhaps most critically, my circle of competition has almost never extended beyond my circle of friends. So the way I played Smash 64, the people I played it with, and the things I learned about it, meant that Kirby and Pikachu seemed way better than anyone else in 64. And so future Smash games felt a lot more mechanically sound. But while I was infuriating my friends with Mewtwo and smash attacking explosives, a very different style was developing. Melee's deeper mechanics and twitchy, lightning-fast gameplay made it inevitable that it could be a competitive game, but I don't think Sakurai or anyone else could have predicted just how deep that rabbit hole went.
EVO 2014, it's time to smash!
It's been 13 years, and it is still considered by many to be the best game in the series from a competitive standpoint. There are two major reasons that this could happen. And the first, Melee features an array of stages that are far better balanced than most of 64's. And I'm not just talking about Final Destination. You see, a flat plane favors some characters and puts others at a disadvantage, so picking it is more of a tactical choice. But to say that all competitive players prefer his Final Destination is woefully inaccurate. But the biggest reason Melee was able to become so competitive was the discovery of advanced techniques. For instance, L canceling, that is, tapping L as you hit the ground, lets you reduce landing lag on aerial attacks. Wave dashing is the result of air dodging into the ground at an angle, letting characters move horizontally without running, allowing you to change position without compromising your attacking or defensive options. And along with an expanded edge guarding game, Edge-hogging can prevent an opponent from being able to grab the edge, because your character is interacting with it. Those are probably the most well known, but there are a lot more. Directional influence, chain throwing, dash dancing, short hopping. These aren't things that you can find in the how to play video. You're not likely to pick them up on your own, and they tend to take a great deal of practice and timing and skill to execute. But competitive Smash is not Fox only, no items, Final Destination, no. Competitive players seek to eliminate random elements, so that the most skilled among them wins. And that skill ceiling has been pushed higher and higher as the metagame has evolved over the past 13 years. And this was only possible because of the way the game could be exploited to create an experience that was, quite frankly, more nuanced than intended. That's why Melee is so beloved. This does lead me into a bit of a precarious position. If a couple of people are dedicated to Smash 64, I know that an enormous swath of the community adores Melee. To criticize it is to tempt bringing the wrath of that community upon me. So I'll ask you all to keep in mind that my critique is necessarily an opinionated one. Remember that fun is subjective, and no matter what my personal feelings toward Melee are, I would never criticize anyone for not having fun right. If my opinion differs from yours, that's not at all a slight against you personally, and I will happily debate and communicate with you in the comments. With that said, I believe that as far as the metagame has evolved, competitive Melee is, on the whole, an entirely different game from what most people think of as Super Smash Bros. I mean, here's me and my friend Steven going at it with our mutual best character. We've both played this game for a long time. but we're not doing anything outside the boundaries of Smash. Now, here's a competitive match with the same character. Unless you already know a lot about high-level play, you might not even be able to follow what's going on. There is a huge difference, even just visually, between the two styles. Competitive Melee breaks through so many boundaries, but that does mean that it lacks a certain degree of accessibility. I think that's where a huge point of contention comes from. Competitive Melee players want Smash Bros. To be something that it was never really trying to be. As Sakurai said, I doubt we'll ever see one that's as geared toward hardcore gamers as Melee was. It was just too difficult. And look, like hopping off the edge and spiking or meteor smashing an opponent is a blast when it works, and likely to lead to your demise if it doesn't. It's a worthy gamble and a really fun mechanic. Edge-hogging, on the other hand, feels a lot more exploitative. No matter what side of it I'm on, I just don't feel good about it. It seems like a risk-free way to completely cut someone off from staying alive, and a mechanic like that needed to be nerfed. I'm not saying at all that you're wrong if you enjoy Melee competitively, because honestly, I enjoy every Smash Bros. Game competitively, and in fact I really feel for you guys. You got one game that was really what you wanted, and then the series moved in a different direction. I think the competitive Melee community is an awesome thing, and an intrinsic, highly passionate part of the wider Smash Bros. Fan base. Melee is what it is, and whether you look at it competitively or not, what it is one of the most significant games ever made. It was the GameCube's killer app in every sense of the term. It was the reason that little box stayed connected to my TV long after I had stopped playing anything else on it. The GameCube hardware sold just under 22 million units worldwide. Super Smash Bros. Melee sold over 7 million copies. That means that nearly a fourth of all GameCube owners also had Melee. But it was more than just a commercial success, and more than just a great game. It's not at all hyperbole to claim it as one of the greatest. Sakurai and his team seized the opportunity to christen the GameCube, and in doing so, they took what had been a fun crossover fighting game and made it the centerpiece of every Nintendo generation since. And you know, it's a good thing Melee had so much for us to sink our teeth into, because it would be an entire generation. 6.5 years before we got a new Smash Bros. And if Melee was one of the greatest, then this game would be one of the most divisive. How did that turn out? We'll jump ahead to 2008 and find out next time. If you've watched this whole thing, you should probably subscribe to the Geek Critique so you don't miss it. I'd also really appreciate it if you'd help me get the word out by posting this on your favorite forums or subreddits, or just emailing it to gaming sites. And hey, if you'd like to help out but you're strapped for time, just give the video a thumbs up. It actually does help my ranking in some complicated way that I don't understand. And speaking of which, shout out to Redditor Ninja Backwards, who posted my last video on the R Gaming subreddit. It might have been pretty much ignored, but your efforts are so very much appreciated. Check out that Smash 64 video if you missed it, but go back and watch all my other episodes, like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, donate to support the channel, and you keep geeking, I'll keep critiquing. Thanks for watching.